Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner is the Israeli Defense Forces spokesperson. He's with us now. Lieutenant Colonel, good pleasure to have you with us. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you, Vashi. Very good to be here.
Could you start off by speaking to the imminence of a ground offensive? We have been, talking for a number of days, interviewing your colleagues about the possibility of it, listening to various politicians in Israel. From your perspective, how close is the possibility of a ground offensive at this point?
Indeed, we are now on day 16 of our operation to destroy and dismantle Hamas after the most brutal massacre in the history of the state of Israel of our people, with some 1,300, more than 1,300 victims butchered, murdered, assassinated, tortured, and some 212 people abducted. That's the latest number from this morning. And that number could increase. We still have 100 people that are unaccounted for. So in the aftermath of that attack, Israel has mobilized in order to make sure it can never happen again to Israel. We've conducted hundreds of strikes against Hamas, its leaders, its infrastructure, taking away and dismantling their operational capabilities step by step. And indeed, we are in the midst of, or probably at the height of our preparations for a possible ground operation. We've recruited some 300,000 reservists. We are organizing the forces on the ground. We are taking the necessary steps so that those forces will be equipped, trained, and tasked with their missions, with their individual missions, in order to root out Hamas.
I know there was a strike yesterday against a mosque in the West Bank, I think in Jenin. My apologies if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. And the intelligence that the IDF shared was that there was an imminent attack basically coming from Hamas and a joint Hamas and Islamic Jihad squad. When you talk about eradicating Hamas or ending its capabilities, if you were to assess up to this point in the war how much of that capability you have been able to eliminate through your airstrikes, for example, on Gaza, what would you say?
So Hamas in the Gaza Strip, it's not only eradicating its operational capabilities, but we are talking about changing the paradigm once and for all, making this terrorist organization a thing of the past with regard to their ability to govern the Gaza Strip as a staging ground against the people of Israel, as a staging ground for massacres, as a staging ground for abduction. So indeed, we are moving forward every day, and every day we are taking out hundreds of targets. We've killed tens of their operatives. We've targeted their leaders. Their command and control capabilities are diminished, and the organization as a terrorist organization, as a government, is in a state of disarray, that is for sure. Of course, they still have capabilities, and just within the last hour, they fired rockets towards Jerusalem, and they have those capabilities, and we expect that to continue, at least until we can destroy those capabilities as well. We understand that fighting this type of terrorist government, institutionalized terrorists, is a long mission. It is not something that it will be over in a couple of days. And that's why the government has not limited us in a time frame. The scope and the idea is making sure and restoring safety and security to the people of southern Israel and Israel at home.
Do you worry at all, or do you have any lack of confidence in the intelligence provided to the IDF to help govern your operations in Gaza, given the initial failure of intelligence not to recognize the attack was so imminent?
So there are two things we need to understand about the intelligence failure, and indeed, obviously, there was a huge intelligence failure. The failure was on the strategic level of the mindset of our understanding of what Hamas's intentions are. And the IDF for many years had determined that Hamas was not interested in a war with Israel, in a conflict that could jeopardize their seat as a governing body, a governing authority of the Gazan territory, of the Palestinians in Gaza. That was the strategic mistake. But we have a good grasp of their capabilities, of their tools of terror, of their units, of their leaders. We have a good sense of understanding regarding the terrorist network of tunnels that you talked about. So yes, there obviously it's not perhaps not uncomfort from or discomfort from the military and its intelligence, But perhaps the challenge, of course, is the confidence of society in their military's capabilities. But I'd add to that that we don't really have any other option, because if we don't operate against this terrorist institute, it would basically mean that we'd be raising a white flag to terrorism and creating a new norm of terrorism, of mass infiltrations, of mass murder, of mass execution, of abduction. And that's a reality that no Israeli, whether they trust the intelligence has the capabilities or not, can accept. And that is why public support is so vast. That is why our recruiting to the reservists, and I'm one of those reservists, is unprecedented. We've never had such a huge recruitment of so many people because of the state of affairs here. I think this is the most devastating attack Israel has ever endured. I know it's the most devastating terrorist attack Israel has ever endured. And this is why Israel has come together around it.
Just before I let you go, Lieutenant Colonel, I did want to touch on the border, the Rafah border, and in particular the agreement struck just over the last 48 hours to allow for some aid to come in. There are some humanitarian organizations calling for a more sustained access. I know the concern from Israel's perspective is, of course, whether that aid gets into the right hands, and that there was part of the agreement was the ability to ensure that it wouldn't. Do you think from where you sit right now that that kind of sustained access is possible if negotiations do continue?
Obviously, the state of the humanitarian affairs in southern Gaza specifically, where we've told people to evacuate to, is of importance to us. And it is important also to enable the paradigm change that is so required in order to restore safety and security to Israel, but also safety and security to the people of Gaza. The Palestinians of Gaza are not Israel's enemy. Hamas is the enemy, and Hamas needs to be destroyed. So the humanitarian effort, we are coordinating and communicating with the international humanitarian organizations. And I would say they need to be part of this paradigm change in order to make sure that people can endure and overcome the troubles of war. This is a war, and I would say it's a war we're going and determined to win.
Okay, I'll leave it there, Lieutenant Colonel. I appreciate your time today very much. Thank you.
Good morning.